Hey everyone, welcome to the video. If you're new to the channel, my name is Solomon Thomas. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I just got my master's in general psychology, and I have the goal of becoming a clinical psychologist and professor one day. So I'm making these YouTube videos to practice clarifying and articulating myself with the hopes that someone out there who's listening might find some of these videos interesting. So for this video, I wanted to talk about how to get your life together and how to be successful in life. I've discussed some of these ideas in previous videos, and I'll also say that none of these ideas are mine. They're things that I've come across from reading people like Jordan Peterson or Carl Rogers or Carl Jung, and I just thought that'd be useful to share again in this video, and also it helps me practice articulating it. So, in my mind, getting your life together boils down to 4 essential steps. The first step is to set a goal. The second step is to establish a strategy for accomplishing that goal. The third step is to implement the strategy in your life in terms of your habits and your day-to-day activities. And the fourth step is to reevaluate your progress by establishing a feedback loop in terms of how your day is manifesting itself and if you're doing well, and then comparing that to the goal, essentially asking yourself if you're getting closer to your goal or if you're moving further away from your goal. So let's walk through all of those 4 steps. When you're setting a goal, you want it to be something that's motivating to you. You want it to be something that's kind of playful. And what do I mean by playful? When you're playing football, you're playing a nice video game or an intense MMORPG game, when you're playing with other people, the game is somewhat predictable, but it's also exciting because there's a level of it that's unpredictable and there's a level of it that's kind of scary where you might mess up and there's a high level of risk where something might go wrong. And that's, I think, what makes play so engaging. When you go to a movie or you're watching a play or you're out at a bar or something, those environments and those activities are playful because there's a certain amount of risk that's innate in the activity. And I think that's a good way to think about how you should set your goals. You don't want to set a goal that's too easy that you know you'll accomplish tomorrow, maybe in most circumstances, but you also don't want to set a goal that's so far out of your league that you aren't even motivated to try to achieve that goal. And I would say there's some wiggle room there, and everyone's different to a degree, and so this is general advice, but like I said, you want to set a goal that's optimally motivating to you. And some people might not know what they want out of life. And to those people, I would say, in some respects, you do know what you want because you at least likely have what are called anti-goals. And this term comes from these personality psychologists, Charles Carver and Michael Shire. And an anti-goal is just something you don't want. But it's still helpful because it tells you where you don't want to go in life. And so maybe you don't want to be miserable. Maybe you don't want to be alone. Maybe you don't want to be poor. So even if you don't necessarily know where you're trying to move specifically, you at least know that there are ways of living that you want to avoid. And I would say if you don't know where you want to go, start with the anti-goals. Another tip for how to establish a goal or how to figure out what you want would be to do some reading or to look at other people, look at the people around you. If you're watching this video, you have access to social media and there are risks with that, but when you're trying to figure out who you are, which in large part consists of the goals that you set for yourself, it can be helpful to gather as much information as you can about what it is that other people are doing and how other people are living their lives. And then you can judge for yourself and see, to a degree, as you're indirectly experiencing what these other people are doing through social media or through books or through movies, you can think to yourself, oh, that would be cool to have. Oh, I actually don't want to live that life. Or I like the way this person is a teacher. Oh, that maybe could be interesting. Maybe I could go figure out whether or not that would be something that I would like. And so those are just some tips about establishing goals, particularly if you don't know what you want out of life. Second step is to develop strategies after you establish your goal. For most goals, there are multiple strategies that enable you to achieve that goal, but there's still a difference between a good strategy and a bad strategy. A good strategy is one that will get you there. A bad strategy is one that actually pushes you further away from your goal. So, as an example from my life, I currently have a an article that I'm trying to get published in a research journal, and part of the process of developing that article is doing a literature review where I read, let's say, 100 articles or so. So my goal in this instance is to publish this paper, and one of the strategies that I'm going to tackle to accomplish that goal is to get a certain amount of reading done for that part of the article. Maybe that's not the best example. A better example, still from my life, would be I am trying to train for a sub 250 marathon. So, just when it comes to marathon training in general, there are multiple ways to go about it. There are some people who only do running, there are some people who run and bike, there are some people who run, bike, and strength train. And then for those people who run, some of them maybe focus on road running, some of them focus on trail running, some of them focus on speed work, and so they spend more of their days per week on the track. And then some people are like, no, zone 2, lower heart rate, run walking, that's really the secret. And then there's so many combinations of those different ways of trying to become a better marathon runner. After you set your goal, you want to adopt a strategy that you feel will help you achieve your goal, but also can be synchronized into all of the other things you have going on in your life, logistically, psychologically, socially, and also when it comes to maybe a career or job or something else that you're dealing with. That leads into the next part. After you set your goal, and after you adopt a strategy that you feel will help you make progress, you then have to figure out how to implement those strategies into your day-to-day activities. And this part of the pattern is really talking about habits. And I would highly recommend to anyone out there to read Atomic Habits by James Clear. I think that's a great book for trying to understand what habits are, and also it has many practical tools for building good habits and breaking bad habits. And this is something that I learned from Jordan Peterson. While we can ruminate on the past and we can project ourselves forward into the future and think about how our lives are going to be next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, our experiential life to a large degree consists of the small day-to-day moments that we repeat all the time. So what's the first thing that you do when you wake up? What's the thing that you do before you go to sleep? And then, of course, how do you spend your time throughout the day? There are times where people eat and people drink water, people go out and maybe get exercise. So it can be useful to understand that your day is not something that is in isolation, although it's what takes up most of your experience a lot of the time when we think about like how we're feeling right now or how our life is going in the current moment. It's useful to understand that your habits can be more or less aligned with your overall strategy that is more or less aligned with helping you achieve your goal. And again, to the degree that your goal is motivating, that whole story of wanting to, for example, become a marathon runner, and so I'm going to make sure I get my 70 miles a week in, and so that means I need to get 10 miles in today, and so I have to wake up at this certain time and then put my shoes on and make sure that I stretch out for this amount of time before I go for a run. To the degree that your goal is motivating, it enables you to, for lack of better terms, feel strong and confident in your implementation of your strategy. Carl Rogers was a famous American psychotherapist. He coined the term active listening. And one of the things that he emphasized was the importance of conceptualizing yourself, your personality, you as a being, as more of a process that's dynamic and changing and fluid rather than as a state, as something that is static and rigid. And I think one of the things that can go wrong when trying to formulate a life for yourself is that we can become captured or possessed or tyrannized over by our goals. I think the importance of the fourth step of, after setting your goals and deciding upon a strategy and implementing them into your habits, you're going to want to reassess the validity of your goal as well as your progress towards that goal. It might be that, for example, again, like as I'm training for a marathon, maybe I realize that, hypothetically, the goal isn't motivating enough, let's say, to run a sub 250 marathon because I am actually faster than I thought I was. And so maybe I need to shift that goal to a 240 to be something that's a little more daunting and something that's a little more playful. So that way I can be motivated and incentivized to keep doing what I'm doing. Or maybe I find out that running is just something that's not for me. And I want to do something that's equally as difficult as running a marathon, but in a different domain in the athletic space. So maybe I want to go be a bodybuilder instead or something like that. I think that what can be most helpful to avoid getting trapped in your habits or your strategies or your goals is to understand that you aren't a linear kind of creature that just goes from point A to point B. You're more like a God, I don't have the words for it other than self-organizing hierarchical system that navigates the world and navigates reality kind of in an upward spiral where instead of going to point A to point B, then you're done. You go to point A, you're at point A, you go to point B, then C, then D, then E. And it's kind of like a loop because oftentimes what happens in life is you come back to a point where you were before, but now you have more knowledge and you have more experience and perhaps you have more wisdom. And so in that same position, you can see more and you can reflect more and understand more. And I think that process of elevating yourself by not only accomplishing goals, but changing your goals and learning how to decide what's a good and a bad goal, that's what ultimately I think helps you transform your personality and become someone that's worthy of admiration and someone who you want to be and someone who, when you envision yourself 5, 10 years out, being someone that you could be proud of. So that's the end of the video. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.